Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to our quiet journey through time. Tonight, let's drift back to a very old city, a place called Rome, way back in the year 897. It was a time that felt a little less peaceful, a period of quiet changes and hushed conversations within the grand old city. The leadership, once a symbol of calm, had seen many shifts, with leaders often coming and going like gentle breezes. In this changing landscape, leaders would sometimes face challenges, and their time would come to a gentle close. And then there was a leader named Pope Formosus. He guided the city from the year 891 to 896, and like many in his position, he had gathered around him various feelings and opinions. After his passing, the city quietly hoped for a time of calm, but instead something quite unexpected happened. The leader who had passed away would, in a way, be brought back, not in glory, but in a very curious manner. Formosus had been laid to rest peacefully in the Grand St. Peter's Basilica, his face already still, his hands gently folded. But 9 quiet months later, under the time of another leader, Pope Stephen VI, a decision was made to gently open his resting place. Why, you might wonder? Perhaps Stephen held some quiet disagreements. Perhaps the feelings of the time required a moment for all to focus. Perhaps Formosus, even in his rest, felt like a subtle presence in the shifting political landscape. The whispers suggested he was considered unworthy, ambitious, that he had not followed the path of light. But to make these feelings understood, Stephen felt he needed something more than just words. He needed a moment of clear understanding, a kind of formal gathering. So, in January of 897, the quiet remains of Formosus were gently brought forth from their resting place. They were, as you might imagine, just a fragile form, touched by time, wrapped in soft old linen. His bones were gently held together, his form was darkened, and his eyes long closed to the world. And yet something quite unique happened. He was carefully dressed in his full special robes. A ring was gently placed back on his quiet finger, and a special crown was adjusted atop what remained of his head. He was then gently set upon a throne in the Lateran Basilica, almost like a quiet figure watching over a council of living men. The people of Rome gathered around, a little curious and a little hushed, and Pope Stephen VI quietly entered the hall, his robes flowing, his face calm, yet with a hint of deep seriousness. The quiet gathering, known as the Cadaver Synod, had gently begun. This gathering was not merely symbolic. It was not just a story. It was, in its own formal way, a very real event. Pope Stephen VI stood before the quiet form of Formosus and began to speak, as though the silent one could hear him. "You stand accused," Stephen gently intoned, "of breaking promises, of not following the quiet rules of the Church, of taking on this special role while still holding another, which the quiet laws forbid.
The court writers wrote down every word, their pens softly scratching on parchment, while the faint scent of old things lingered gently in the air. Every few moments, Formosus's quiet form would gently lean to one side, and was then softly propped back up by assistants, standing quietly behind the throne, their faces as pale as the marble around them. It was a kind of gentle performance, more curious than holy. "You are unworthy," Stephen continued in a quiet voice. "You took on this role with too much ambition." And then, quite remarkably, the court called for someone to speak on behalf of the quiet one. A young assistant, perhaps a little nervous, was asked to speak for the silent form. His voice was soft as he said, "My client is unable to respond." A few soft murmurs might have rippled through the hall.
But Stephen did not smile. The quiet decision was never truly in doubt. Formosus was declared responsible for the accusations, and not just responsible, but deeply so. Pope Stephen VI then gave his quiet orders. All of Formosus's acts as a leader were to be gently set aside. His special blessings were to be quietly withdrawn, meaning that every bishop and priest he had quietly appointed was suddenly considered not officially recognized. His sacred robes were gently removed from his form. The special ring was quietly taken from his still finger. And finally, the ultimate gesture of humility. 3 fingers of his right hand, the ones used for blessings, were gently removed. Then the quiet form was carefully moved from the throne, out of the hall, and down the steps of the basilica. The people of Rome watched in hushed silence. Formosus's body was then laid into a simple, quiet resting place, and a few days later it was gently brought up again and quietly placed into the flowing Tiber River. But Rome had seen quite enough. The cadaver synod, which was meant to make Formosus seem small, had instead deeply saddened the city. Even in a time of strong feelings and sometimes quick decisions, this felt different. It felt a little unsettling. Whispers turned to quiet outrage. How could a man, silent, sacred, and passed away, be treated in this manner? How could a leader descend into such quiet intensity? The feelings came back swiftly. Within a few months, Pope Stephen VI was quietly taken into custody, and not long after, he was found in his cell, his life having come to a quiet end. Was it justice? Was it a quiet balancing? Or was it something from above? No one could truly say. After Stephen VI's passing, a new leader, Theodore II, took the throne, and his first quiet act was to gently undo what had happened. He ordered that Formosus's body be quietly brought back from the Tiber River. And, quite remarkably, it was found. The quiet, fragile remains, a hand still missing a few fingers, were gently reburied in St. Peter's Basilica with full, quiet honors. No more public displays, no more disrespect. But it was too late. The event had touched something sacred,
leaving a subtle mark. For generations, the quiet image of a past leader on trial would linger in the thoughts of future leaders. The memory of that moment, of the quiet form dressed in silk and gently blamed for the actions of others, would never quite fade away. To us today, the cadaver synod might sound like something from a dream, a bit unusual. But to the medieval world, it had its own quiet reasoning. Formosus, in his rest, had become a quiet symbol of past disagreements, of old challenges, of inconvenient truths. Pope Stephen VI felt a need to quietly strengthen his own position. He felt a need to gently reshape the past, and to do that, he made the Silent One seem responsible. By finding Formosus responsible after his passing, Stephen hoped to gently erase his influence, to quietly undo his appointments, to claim his own position as truly legitimate. But in trying to reshape history, he created one of its most memorable and perhaps unsettling chapters. What happened in 897 was never truly forgotten. The cadaver synod became a quiet warning whispered in the halls of later leaders. Be careful of the wish to change the past, or it may quietly touch you. Ironically, many of the leaders who followed had been quietly appointed by those Formosus had blessed. So even though his quiet decrees were officially set aside, they could not truly be undone. Later leaders tried to gently erase the memory of the event. Some quietly made rules against similar gatherings after someone passed.
Others simply wished it had never happened, but the subtle mark remained. In old pictures, in quiet stories, in gentle observations. Even a famous writer, Dante, centuries later, softly hinted at it in his visions. Rome had always been a city of many gentle contrasts. Old temples turning into quiet churches, saints resting beside powerful figures, glory built upon old foundations. But the cadaver synod showed something deeper, that when power feels boundless, when a quiet fear settles in the church, even those who have passed are not entirely beyond reach. Formosus did not speak at his gathering. He did not argue or cry or utter a single sound. He simply sat quietly, draped in the special robes, gently asked to account for choices made by others. And in that deep silence, history heard a quiet question that still softly echoes. What is true understanding when the living must feel a certain way about those who have passed, and those who have passed must feel a certain way about the living? A curious thought to drift off to, isn't it? And now, as this curious story comes to a gentle close, let your own mind begin to unwind. Allow yourself to feel completely safe and serene. Every thought can drift away like little clouds in the night sky. Your breath is soft and even. Your body is peaceful and heavy. Let the quiet darkness wrap around you like a soft blanket.
May your dreams be filled with calm, peaceful images. Sleep deeply, dear listener. Good night.